So yeah, thank you for the introduction, Gabriel. Indeed, in January this year, I took up the position of panel coordinator in the Synergy grants. Now, the Synergy team is a bit special in the sense that there's not a unique panel coordinator. We are 7 at the moment, but this is my 4th year at the ERC. And before I was working in the mathematics panel and the systems and communications engineering panel, so P1 and P7 in our jargon. So I sat already in a few in quite a lot panel meetings. So let's hope we will get to some tips about how to prepare the application. But the program today is, I want to start with some generalities on the ERC program and how to situate it in the European landscape of research funding. But then, of course, the focus will move to the Synergy scheme and some typical misconceptions that I could already see in the question. So thank you very much for that to the 3 NCPs for sharing these questions in advance. I pulled some data that I think can be interesting on the Baltic States on proposals that you guys submitted. And then we'll dedicate some time also to explain the evaluation process in detail, which for Synergy is slightly different than from the rest of grants. I will also mention a few novelties, but these are rather minor. And then hopefully we'll have lots of time for Q&A, and I will leave the tips for there. So based on the questions, we'll focus on some things or other things. Now, I also want to say I apologize in advance because my kid has been sick these days, and I think I'm picking it up. So it might be that I have to mute myself for a moment to cough. So if you see myself muting myself, it's because of this, because I will need a second. But okay, let's get started. So if there's one top level idea that I want you to retain from today is that the ERC is not this distant institution in Brussels, but it's actually an institution that's funding research as decided by the research community itself. So it's really important for us to remain what we call a bottom-up research program. So in research funding, we typically make the distinction between top-down funding and bottom-up funding. So top-down is when someone, typically politicians, decides what are the priorities for research. And this is also very important. For example, COVID or chips industry in Europe, or you name it. And then they allocate a lot of money for that. But bottom-up research is the opposite. So there's no predetermined subjects. All fields of the sciences and the humanities are fundable, and it's up to the researchers to submit the proposals. And it will be the scientific community itself that will decide what gets funded and what not. Related to that, one of our cornerstones is the full scientific governance. So the authority of the ERC, the full strategy of the ERC is decided by an independent scientific council, and this scientific council is composed of people from the academia, from professors. So it's true that the Commission allocates the budget to the ERC, but then what happens with this budget is decided by the ERC fully independently. And this is something that's really essential and that we need to keep defending again and again. So it's something that we should not take for granted, and that the research community, I think, should cherish and should permanently remind everybody, politicians, rectors, everybody, that this has to stay that way. And of course, related to that, I'm putting a lot the word scientific on purpose. The evaluation is fully scientific. So as opposed to some other programs, things like societal or economic impact, if you have them in your project, you can highlight them. It will be important, but this is not a requirement. So the most important thing is scientific excellence and scientific impact. This is all that matters. So this is for the science. And also a typical misconception is that our evaluation panels and the remote referees that we invite, they are not necessarily European. They are not based in Europe. They are from the whole world. Even panel chairs can be from, and are in fact from all around the world. So this is in a nutshell the ERC in the top level. And we're a relatively young institution. We exist since 2007, so less than 3 framework programs in our lingo. This is our 3rd framework program, which runs for 7 years typically, and our budget, you can see here, that has been steadily increasing. We have more than 2 billion per year. Most of it goes to the vast majority goes to grants. And this represents, in the current program, which is called Horizon Europe, this represents 17% of the budget. This is a significant amount. You can think of Horizon Europe as the big research pot of money from the European Union, and we're a significant part of it. But again, even if you see it steadily increasing in this graph, this is something that we need to defend again and again. So the minute we lose the support of the scientific community and that this stops being an excellent program, this risks not continuing to be the case. So again, thank you very much for the support, and thank you for the contact points to the national contact points for continuously promoting the ERCEA. I think this is a success story at the European level, but it's a success story shared with the whole scientific community. So I see ourselves as part of this community. How do we channel all this money? Let me just mention all the grants that we have, but then we'll focus in synergy. But I think for comparison, it's interesting. So we have 3 individual grants, as we call them: starting grants, consolidator grants, and advanced grants, which are very similar, but they are for different career stages of the PIs. So starting grants are between 2 and 7 years after your PhD. Consolidator grants are between 7 and 12 years after your PhD, and advanced grants, well, surprisingly, for advanced grants, there's not even a requirement to have a PhD, and this is intentional. This is to allow for everybody with a diverse career path who ended up being an excellent researcher, maybe in the industry or wherever, that these people can also apply for individual ERC funding. But normally it's senior researchers. The money increases a little bit with the type of grant. So it's 1.5 million for starting, 2 million for consolidator, 2.5 for advanced, and there's always the possibility of an additional extra million, but this is for special categories like accessing large infrastructure facilities, large experimental facilities, or buying very expensive and big equipment, or if you're moving your lab to Europe, so things like this. But this is a bit special. And these grants run for 5 years, the 3 of them. And in the 3 cases, the PI needs to spend 50% of their working time in Europe. And when I say Europe in this presentation, I will always mean the European Union or associated countries to the work program. It's equivalent in practical matters. Also, the minimum time dedication decreases a little bit with the type of grant. So it's 50%. Let me use the laser. This little man that you see here is the time dedication, or woman. 50% for starting, 40% for consolidator, 30% for advanced grants. So these are the individual grants. How does synergy compare? Synergy is for a team that brings together 2 to 4 PIs, and they can be at any career stage. So starting, consolidator, or advanced career stage. That should not play a role. I'll say a little bit more on this later. It's up to 10 million plus 4 million extra budget, and they run for a little bit longer. They run for 6 years instead of 5 years. And what's really particular about these grants is that one of the PIs can be based outside of Europe, of the European Union, or one of the associated countries, and still be fully funded by the ERC grant. The requirement is the same, to spend 50% of the time in Europe, except for this PI, if it's the case that there's one of these PIs that is based outside of Europe. So this PI can stay in their country. And let me also mention that we have a smaller scheme. It's called proof of concept, but this is only for PIs that already have a starting an ERC grant. They can apply for a proof of concept grant, and this is a lump sum. It's a small payment of 150,000 euros, 50,000 euros to explore the innovation potential of the grant. So this is the ERC in a nutshell. And already I want to stress some misconceptions that were reflected in the questions that you guys shared with me. So misconception number 1, and this is very common: you do not need different countries. In fact, you do not even need different host institutions to apply for a synergy grant. And because I will show an example here that's showing this, you do not need 4 PIs for a synergy grant. People believe it because there are lots of grants, synergy grants, that are visible out there with 4 PIs, but there's also lots of proposals already with 4 PIs. But that doesn't mean if you're 3 PIs, if you're 2 PIs, you're in a more difficult position to to get the grant. So from 2 to 4 PIs, it's allowed. And even if all of them are in the same host institution, this is also allowed. And I am a mathematician by training. I like to see proof of things. So I'm going to show proof of things here. You have, for example, this grant from 2019. It's studying the colostrum is some part of the brain, as far as I understand, and they're studying the relationship between this part of the brain and schizophrenia. So this is in the life sciences and medical sciences and so on. They only have 2 PIs, and both are from the same host institution, the University of Geneva in Switzerland. So this is certainly possible. I'm not advising for or against it. I'm just saying what are the rules at our level and showing that this is possible. So this is it. So what do you really need for to have a synergy proposal? You need an ambitious research problem, a research question that cannot be tackled by any of the PIs independently, and that you need to join forces to make a significant advance there. So it has to be, the synergy has to be necessary in the problem, but also necessary in the approach, because okay, maybe you cannot tackle the question alone. So the problem it really is a synergy proposal, but also the approach, the methodology needs to bring together your 4 expertises, the know-how of the group. So also the approach needs to show this synergy. Now, it's also important that the PIs remain committed throughout the whole grant. So, for example, it's not the idea that some PI does the data gathering in year 1, then another PI does the modeling in year 2, and another PI does the validation in year 3. This is not the idea of a synergy grant. We expect a strong and tight collaboration throughout the duration of the grant. So the PIs are expected to stay committed throughout the grant. Also quite important, the PIs have to be in relative equality. So even though there's always a corresponding PI, this is only an administrative point of contact. To simplify the things at an agency level, it's easier to have one single point of contact than to have 2, 3, or 4. There has been a lot of debate internally on how to call this corresponding PI, to not give the idea that there's one principal investigator and the rest are less principal in a way. So after lots of discussions, we settled for, oops, did I lose the screen? Sorry. Do you see my screen back?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Something happened here on my end. Okay, but just to say that the corresponding PI is not more important in any way, and this is just the word we came up with, that the scientific council came up with that better represents this idea, that this is just the person that receives the letters, but that's it. They are all equal, and again they can be at any career stage. And this brings me to the third misconception, which is that it's not for early career stage, that early career stage PIs will have a especially difficult time in synergy. And I think it kind of makes sense to think like that, right? Because if you're competing with people from every career stage, maybe you see the leaders in your field applying and you think, how am I going to compete with this person who is a leader in my same own field? But this is not the way of thinking. So we always instruct the PIs, and they typically respect it. They assess every PI at their career stage. So if you're a starting profile, you will be assessed against what's expected from someone of your academic age, and you will not be directly compared to someone that is much more advanced at a more advanced career stage than you. And again, to prove it, I have here this grant. It's again in the life sciences on multicellular symmetry breaking, so how life systems evolve in a way. And I don't want to disclose any personal or confidential information, but you can go to their websites. It's public information, and you can see that out of these 4 PIs, 2 of them, they publicly state that they got their PhD in 2015. So about 7 years later, they were probably in between starting and consolidator phase. They got the synergy grant, and another, right before the synergy call, they got 2 young investigator awards. So at least 3 of these 4 people, I think they can safely be labeled, and I don't want to offend anyone, they can safely be labeled relatively early career stage PIs, and they got the grant. So that's really a possibility. Don't be afraid to apply because of that, because you think you're not advanced enough. Now, there's lots of questions on what is synergy, and this is a difficult question, and I think it will be better illustrated by the examples that you brought later of the grantees. But I can already tell you what is not synergy. And I know this does not answer the question, but hopefully it throws some ideas. So as I said before, simply passing data or information from one team to the other is not enough synergy typically, and just some networking on loose cooperation between the PIs, this is not synergy there. So this grant scheme, we will see that is so competitive that if you fail to show the synergy, you will probably not make it to the funding stage. On the other hand, and I will show this misconception in a minute, interdisciplinarity is not a requirement for synergy grants. I would say this is the most common misconception, by the way. So you can be fully within one field, fully within one discipline, but have a problem that's groundbreaking, that requires the expertise of all of you. You have an approach that relies on this expertise from all of you and get the grant. And as an example here, something from my field, from mathematics, we have this project, Modern Aspects of Geometry. And of course, geometry relates to other branches in mathematics, but I think it's quite safe to say that this project is fully within mathematics and almost fully within geometry and related fields, to be on the safe side. And I don't even understand this fully myself, but let me prove it by saying what is their goal. The aim of this project is to prove basic conclusions concerning cycles, classify Hodge structures, and cohomological invariants, and place the hypercolor landscape at the center of modern mathematics. So again, my point is not to explain this statement, but I think it kind of shows how specific this project is and how interdisciplinarity is not a requirement for synergy grants. Move on with some data fresh from last year, from Synergy 24. And this shows the success rate of the PIs per host country, per nationality of the host institution, not of the PI. So how to read this? For example, here we have Deutschland, Germany. They had 53 PIs funded in different projects, maybe in the same project, but 53 PIs. And the overall success rate for PIs based in a German host institution is below 10%. So you can see that the success rate is almost always below 10%. For Luxembourg is exactly 10% with one PI, with the exception of Korea, South Korea. There was one applicant from South Korea and they got the grant. So the success rate for South Korea is 100%. But this is a little bit artificial. But in general, you see how competitive this grant is. The average success rate in 2024 was well below 10%. And the most funded countries were Germany, France, the UK, and sorry. And outside of the European Union, with this extended participation that we allow, we have, of course, the US, Switzerland, Australia, and South Korea. Unfortunately, there is no Baltic state that was funded in 2024. In fact, I could not even find any synergy grant going to a Baltic state in any previous year. But what I could find is one successful participant in synergy. So in ERCEA projects, you always have the host institutions, one for the regular grants, up to 4 for the synergy grants, but you can have other beneficiaries as participants. And we have this project here in history, combining history, machine learning, and natural sciences. And they have one partner based in Latvia, this professor, maybe I'll ask someone to read the name, Normund, or please don't get mad at me, Normund Stivrins.
That's correct, Norman Steverinch.
Okay, thank you very much. So he's a professor at the University of Latvia, I believe, in the Faculty of Geography and Earth Sciences, and he's a participant in Synergy. So that's maybe someone you guys can contact if you don't have them under the radar, and he can tell you a bit how Synergy projects work from the inside. But it's not a PI in the traditional sense, but at least there's something. And also some data on Synergy proposals. So the Synergy scheme runs since 2018 in its current form. And on average, you have 1 or 2 proposals per country, which I think are decent numbers. So there's 11 for Estonia, 9 for Latvia, 8 for Lithuania in total. And this includes the host institutions, which are the majority, and the beneficiaries like the one I just showed. Okay, switching gears here. And I'm going to speak about the evaluation procedure now. The only evaluation criterion is excellence. Now, this is a bit of a buzzword, so in a way it's like saying nothing, but to make it more concrete, it's always excellence of the research project and excellence of the PI. And excellence of the research project, and these are not so much buzzwords, but they have a meaning, because this is how the panel will write the reviews and will analyze the projects. First, is the project groundbreaking? Is it ambitious as opposed to incremental? If the answer is no, you're already out. But if the answer is yes, okay, you're tackling something that's great, but do you bring anything new? Do you have anything new here? Is your approach feasible? Is your methodology sensible, or you're just tackling a very important problem? Everybody can list a very important problem, but if you don't have an angle to attack it, then of course you're out. So groundbreaking nature, feasibility of the project, and only then comes the PI. So many people confuse the ERC grants with a prize, but the ERC grants are grants that fund research projects. So it's a requirement to have an ambitious research project, and only then comes the PI. Is the PI the right person to implement this project? And if yes, you have very good chances of getting the grant. And for Synergy, on top of that, you need to show the synergetic aspects that I mentioned before. But rather than looking at these words, I really encourage you to go to the work program of your year or to the information for applicants. It should be in both documents, and read the evaluation questions that the panel has to fill in the review form, because these questions can change a little bit with years. We always announce it, but it's always important to be up to date with the latest version and make sure that your proposal answers these questions, because this is how we will brief the panel that they have to assess the proposals. And if they don't, we regularly go back to them to make sure that they only evaluate what the ERC wants them to evaluate. Now, preparing a proposal, there's templates for everything. There's an administrative part that's not that interesting for me, but then it's very important for me to explain the difference between part B1 and part B2. So part B1 is what we call the extended synopsis and the CV. This is the only thing that the panel will evaluate at step 1. So this has to be written in a way that in normal panels, generalist in your field, but in Synergy, any generalist scientist from your domain. So if you're in physics, you have to write it in a way that maybe a chemist, that maybe a computer scientist, for example, can also understand a little bit what you're doing. This extended synopsis needs to be compelling. It needs to send you to step 2. And at step 2 and step 3, the panel will evaluate the scientific proposal, which is the full proposal, 15 pages, and there is where you have to get technical, because this proposal will be sent to remote referees, which are specialists in your field. Again, sorry for coughing. Yeah, and for the CV and the track record, there's a template. We strongly encourage you to follow this template. It's up to 4 pages per PI, and I'll say a bit more on this in a minute. If there's questions in the Q&A, we can go into more detail about all this. A second. Yes, so on the evaluation process, which for Synergy is a little bit different. So for 2025, I already advanced you that the success rate that we expect is around 7%. So it's a really competitive call, but you have to visualize how things go. So we have initially a meeting only with the panel chairs to assign the proposals for review. And at this meeting, we have about 90 panel members that are Synergy panel members covering all physical sciences and engineering, life sciences, social sciences, and humanities. We can use any of them, but also 150 what we call PEVs, panel evaluators. This is a pool of panel members serving in other calls, but they will still act as generalists. So we will assign about 5 per proposal. It's not set in stone, but it will be about 5. And then only the panel chairs and the vice chairs will come to Brussels for the step 1 meeting. And based on these reviews that they received from the panel members and the panel evaluators, they will decide it's a first triage. They can pass maximum 7 times the call budget to step 2. So about half of the proposals maybe will be killed here already. Then we activate the whole machinery of the ERCEA, and on top of the panel members, we will invite lots of external reviewers, which are specialists in your field, to review your proposal. So in total, we aim at around 8 to 12 reviews per proposal, but it can be a little bit less, or it can even be a lot more, depending on your proposal. So this is done on a proposal per proposal basis. Now, based on all this input, the full panels, so all the 90 panel members will meet in Brussels, and they, they will decide which proposals are worth inviting for an interview. But in this third phase, there will be no more remote referees, so there will be no more reviews written. But it's only the preparation of the interview, and then you come. In Synergy, this is the exception. You come in person to Brussels, we pay for the trip, and you come and you present your project and you defend it in the Q&A. Okay. So yes, as Gabriele was saying, I strongly encourage you to apply, especially if you have an idea that has potential, but I need to warn you about the resubmission restrictions. So you can check this in the work program because it can change. So it's better to check in your specific work program. But the situation right now, if you make it to step 2 and step 3 and you're not funded, there is no restriction. But at step 1, if you don't make it to step 2, you can receive a B or a C. If you receive a B, it's okay, there's no resubmission restrictions. But if you receive a C, which really means that there's something missing in the proposal, or the PIs are really not at the level that was expected, or the idea is really not groundbreaking. So a C is a really bad score. It signals that you need to really rethink your proposal. If you receive a C, you need to wait out 2 years to apply again. So of course, I encourage all of you to apply, but don't apply just with anything. Have an idea that's minimally decent. Otherwise, you will have resubmission restrictions, which is not a big deal, maybe. The other side of the coin, and this is to support Gabriele's message to encourage you to apply, is, so there's a lot of information in this graph, but let me just compare these two green things here. So previous Synergy applicants are 3 times more successful. Dark green means that they were funded. So previous Synergy applicants are 3 times more successful than new applicants to the Synergy scheme. So do apply, get the feedback, get the reviews, improve your project, and reapply. There's no problem with this. And in fact, it's not directly shown in the graph, but almost half of the PIs that were funded in Synergy 2024 had applied previously to a Synergy grant. So there's a learning process there, and go through it. There's nothing wrong with rejection, especially the first time. Sorry, this coughing is killing me a bit. Sorry for this. We don't have the call calendar for 2026 available yet, but the 2025 one should give you an idea. So Synergy opened in July. and it was open throughout the summer. So the deadline to apply last time was 6th of November. So it should be more or less something like this for 2026 if you're thinking to apply. Let me quickly go to the next one. Yes, the little novelties since 2024 that I want to highlight. So as I said, the panels primarily evaluate the project, and then if the PI is the right person to the project, this was always the case, but now it has been explicitly added in the work program. So what's written in the work program now is that the panels will primarily evaluate the research project. The evaluation questions, as I mentioned, have been revised, especially this high risk, high gain concept, which led to lots of questions in the past, has been removed. This doesn't mean that we're not looking for ambitious projects. We are looking for ambitious projects, but we're not terming them high risk, high gain anymore. And the CV and the track record templates have been combined and I would say simplified. So now you're asked, on top of some standard things, you're asked to list 10 research outputs and explain them, especially because think that in Synergy, the panel is very broad, so they might not be in your field. So if you published a paper that, I don't know, discovers the new methodology that you're going to use in the project, then you have the opportunity and almost the obligation to explain it. This is what the narrative description of the output means. And you also get the opportunity to explain career breaks, like how COVID impacted you, or maybe paternity or maternity leaves, or career unconventional career paths, or anything that you think should be explained to better interpret your CV. You have the opportunity to stress it there. So this is the last thing I will mention. If you do decide to apply, please consult all the official documents and information there. Everything is available on our website. We also have some ERCEA classes, more official than this one, in YouTube. I would look at projects funded in your field to see what kind of ideas are being funded. The ERCEA dashboard is also public. Register in the portal early on. And if you have any question, I will show my email in a minute. You can always write me, but also write to the official mailbox, or even if you write to me, please keep the official mailbox in CC, because they have all the official information. So that's all the basic things I wanted to say. And now in the Q&A, we can go in more detail in part B1 if you want part B2, or the evaluation questions, or you name it. And also I will invite, if the two PIs are here, feel free to chip in and contribute to any of the questions, because I think your point of view is in a way much more interesting than mine. That's it. Thank you very much.